Okay, so in this screen, Russ, did you get the invite? Russ? Did we just like drop the call completely? We did.
You gave up. God, I'm sick of this.
Let's just move forward.
Yeah, I don't have time for this. We gotta get past this. Go ahead, Scott, just start. We don't even need to, I'm not even gonna worry about the broadcast because it's not helping us right now.
Okay.
I always spent 30 minutes on that crap.
All right, let's
It means that
see.
we're all going to have to teach it. So
That's fine.
pay attention.
Well, when you say that, we mean you, right?
Yes, we mean you. That's right, me.
Take notes.
That's 11. All right. Mitchell Hashimoto, young guy, attended school at University of Washington, and he made like $500,000 as a student because there was like this waiting list to get into classes, and students would stand in line like at a concert in order to get the class that they wanted. So he wrote an app that would automatically reserve their space, paid him.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you seeing this, Russ?
I'm.
You're gonna have to share that piece, actually.
I don't know how to share it.
So go back to that main window.
So I was trying to figure it
And
out.
so on the left side, you can say share.
Yeah, I can't see.
Can you point to my screen? This one?
Your screen.
Oh yeah, screen share.
And then choose whatever you want to share.
Okay, how about that?
And then it started. There.
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
All right, lovely.
Yeah, it just took me to come over, man.
So all right, so Mitch Hashimoto, he wrote this app and made a lot of money at the University of Washington as a college student, just standing in line for people electronically, and so he in 2010, late 2010, created Vagrant, and he started. It just kind of went viral, caught on, and that's what our talk is about. He's also the author of Packer. Okay, let me just make a note here that I have speaker's notes, and I had intended to view the speaker's notes on my screen and the slides up here, but if I do that, it's going to screw up. So we'll just work through it as best we can without my speaker's notes, and it'll be fine. So we'll carry on. Of course,
if you wanted to switch that real quick, you'd be okay to do that.
Yeah, you can go back down here right now and move it over to the auxiliary screen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one moment, guys. We'll be right back.
Give us 30 more minutes.
Now, this is going to be a simple one. Lunch will be here by then.
Surprised it isn't already.
And F11 over there, and over here, speaker's notes. Ta-da!
There you go.
Damn. Russ, can you still see?
Yep, I can still see everything.
Okay, cool.
All right, so Vagrant is implemented in Ruby. Packer is kind of complementary. That's another subject, but the virtual machine that I created for our demo was created with Packer. Packer just lets you create a recipe for a virtual machine, like a dev environment or something, and you just run Packer, and it packages up a VM just like you wanted, runs the install from CentOS or Ubuntu or whatever, and installs everything just the way you want it, partitions drives, whatever, everything exactly the way you want it. It's scripted, and you can run provisioners like Chef, Puppet, Salt, others, if you want. So you get a VM that's just perfect, and if you want to tweak it, like change your Python version, you can change your install script for that and get a different Python version, run it again, everything else is identical, it can be versioned in Git, whatever. And so I've created our demo using Packer, and that's implemented in Go. That's a Mitchell Hashimoto creation as well, fairly recent.
Did you work for Google?
No, he's created Hashisoft.com. he created Vagrant. He gives away the VirtualBox plugin for Vagrant, VirtualBox Provider as it's called, and so you can run it for free with VirtualBox. I'm running VMware Workstation on this laptop, and he in 2013, early 2013, he finished development on the VMware Workstation and VMware Fusion plugins for Vagrant, and he sells those for $39 a throw. Or no, it was $85. $39 is the renewal. Yeah, so if you upgrade, you get it for like $39. So he founded Hashisoft.com, Hashimoto Hashisoft, and now he sells it. And I've heard that recently he's gotten $10 million in VC capital to start this new venture. So I mean, here's a guy who's what, 25, 27 years old. He's just rocking it. Oh yes.
Kind of a slacker.
Kind of a slacker. Why? Oh, you know what? I have to restart my speaker's notes in order to have control from the speaker's notes. Okay, so I should be able to do that now. Okay. So Vagrant is a wrapper for virtualization software, useful for more than dev environments. And I use it for a backup thing, and that's our demo. I have this email server running on my laptop, and just for backup purposes, it makes a lot of sense to encapsulate all the email mailboxes into a Vagrant box for backup. That way, if I do lose this, installing email or restoring email from big email spool directory is a lot of trouble, because you might end up with a different email server version and stuff like that. That seemed like a pain to me. But connecting to a network port and syncing over the wire, piece of cake. So I used Packer to create a mailbox running CMU Cyrus, and I just have a synchronization script. I go Vagrant up, sh migrate, and it runs the sync script. Synchronizes everything from the host mailbox to the VM mailbox, and then I do Vagrant halt and shuts it down. So that's what I use it for, one of the things. But for dev environments, it's great because you can spin up anything you want. Oh, by the way, the original logo for Vagrant is right there, and it's not. And the new logo for Vagrant is the background image on the screen. And there was an issue of political correctness that had to be rectified. I knew Will would roll his eyes.
I like it. I hate political correctness.
So Vagrant isolates dependencies and their configurations within a single disposable and consistent environment. So if your company develops an app that runs on Red Hat, you can have a Red Hat virtual machine that you just spin up. You could spin it up on a Mac, on Windows box. I've used Vagrant on Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. So you just do Vagrant up, boom. You can even do Vagrant against a Windows box, which I've done as well. You can have a Windows box, Vagrant up comes your Windows box. You can have a complete .NET development environment, and it's controlled by Vagrant. And so I had one question during a Vagrant presentation. Maybe you remember, Will, because you were there. Somebody said, well, couldn't you just do this yourself? And the answer is yes. You can do it yourself. You can go through all of these steps manually and manage all your own virtual environments, and you can delete them and clone them and start them and stop them and provision them. You can do it all manually. But Vagrant is just an automated process of all of that. It manages everything for you, and that's what computers are for, right? They do that really well. So this is the Tau, or the DAO of Vagrant. In a world with Vagrant, developers can clone any repository from version control, run Vagrant up, and have a fully running development environment without any human interaction. Developers continue to work on their own machine in comfort of their own editors, browsers, and other tools. The existence of Vagrant is transparent and unimportant in the mind of the developer. Vagrant is the workhorse that creates consistent and stable development environments. Okay, so that's true. What Vagrant does is acts like an engine, like in your computer, an application engine. It just sits there. It's headless. It's transparent. It just runs your code. Like I was mentioning earlier, if you need a Red Hat environment and you're on Mac OS, well, you just spin up a Vagrant environment and you can map file systems, or you can share directories. Sync folders is what it's called. So if you want to, I sync folders to my .pip folder often, because that way my Vagrant environment uses the host pip cache on for pip installs, which makes it easy, because when I cache when I do pip install whatever or -r requirements, and I got a big long list of Python packages to install, then my Vagrant environment, since the .pip synced folder points to my host .pip folder, then I'm using all of the cached Python packages on my host. I don't have to download them again every time I rebuild my Vagrant environment, which saves a lot of time. And synced folders also point to the source code. So the source code lives on my host, but I'm running it in the guest, the Vagrant box. And that's really powerful, because you could be working in Python.
That code is under source control.
Yes, you can just do git clone source, and your Vagrant file is in your source, and then you can start up your code, like if you have, like for a Django app, Python manage.py stuff, and that's running code that is in a synced folder. It lives on your host, but it's synced into the Vagrant machine, and you just execute it in the Vagrant machine. But if you're using PyCharm for editing, then you're editing on your host, and also you have port mappings, so you can run it in whatever port on your Vagrant box and map it to another port on your host. So your web browser, where you might be doing testing of your Django app, there's a local port number that maps to a port number on the Vagrant box. Could be the same, could be different. So you can just in a web browser on your host, you can just browse to your Django app that's running on the Vagrant box. So you think of the Vagrant box as just a little engine, like an encapsulated other world that's running this stuff with pipes poked into it where information flows into and out of. So all of your editing is done on your host, your web browsing, testing, unless you're talking unit testing, but usability, just seeing your app actually run in the real world. But it's all executing inside of your Vagrant box. So you can run this Vagrant box in any environment. Windows, so say you got a Red Hat box and it requires Red Hat. You can run it on Windows, you can run it on a Mac, you can run it on Ubuntu, like I'm doing here. And yeah, so you get your compatibility and your consistent environment. You exactly specify your environment. Like at DealerTrack, we're stipulated Python 2.7.3 is the version of Python you will use. So that's what we use in the Vagrant box, Python 2.7.3.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just if you had, let's say you had like a Vagrant file set up to launch 3 hosts, and you were going to run like an Elasticsearch cluster or whatever, and you wanted to have all of your source files in one on your host, can you map your source files or your shared file or directory back to the same one multiple times from multiple Vagrant hosts?
I've never run Vagrant in the multiple host config, though the Vagrant documentation says that's possible. But I've never done it. I've just been in my development environments, just all combine everything. Even though in production you might want to take a Postgres server and break it out into its own, and your web server like Nginx or something. You might have multiple servers in your production scenario, but in your dev environment, I've just always had them all one. And I have seen where Vagrant says, yeah, you can run a multi-machine config, but I've never done that.
Okay. So and it's really simple to set up. I just didn't know if you could map each one of those shared directories back to a single shared directory?
I'm sure you could if it was a multi-machine config. Then Vagrant, all it does is use the virtualization platform's shared folders feature,
Okay.
and they all seem to have it.
Right.
You know, you can just, if you're just using VirtualBox manually, you can do shared folders, and the same with VMware.
Yeah.
It's a consistently applied paradigm.
Yeah. Okay.
So Vagrant is great for onboarding new developers. After Will left DealerTrack, the following Monday, we had a new developer starting, Kyle, and Kyle came in, went to orientation. I met Kyle at noon, and by 1 o'clock, his dev environment was up and running on his new Mac, which I had to wait 6 weeks for my new Mac. Kyle got his same day. It's like all we did was sit in a room much like this, install Vagrant, and do Vagrant up, and boom, there it is. And so his dev environment was working, and that's pretty awesome when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's really awesome.
Yeah, because
considering what we just had to do to get our development environment set up.
Yeah.
So it's really awesome.
yeah. So Vagrant touches on the subject of infrastructure as code. So as the slide says, the development environment is modeled in code so we can use the same tools and principles as we would use in software development, which means version control. So your actual infrastructure is in code, especially when you add Packer to the mix, and which I've done at DealerTrack for some of the projects that the Open Systems team controls. I have the Packer file in the repo along with the application and the Vagrant file. So if we change the requirements, we can change the Packer description, rebuild a Packer box. And the Packer box is not in and of itself in version control, only the JSON description of it. And so I just do Packer build, and it creates a 1 gig image file that is the OS. It's the box file that Vagrant uses. And I save that on my local system, and it consumes a CentOS ISO to build the Packer box, right? So yes, I've got to have my CentOS 4.7 gig CentOS ISO, which does not go in the Git repo, by the way. Just a really short JSON file, and the provisioning code goes, which is shell scripts is what I use. That goes into the Git repo. And then there's the Vagrant file that does some additional provisioning, and you can use Salt, Chef, Puppet, whatever. I use a lot of shell provisioning because that's a little easier. Salt really shines when you have distributed in pillars and master. It does a good job, and when you're using masterless minion, Salt is kind of equivalent to shell scripts in my opinion. But our demo has some Salt. It doesn't do very much. So combined with provisioners, Packer, and other tools, the entire application infrastructure and dependencies can be specified as part of your application source code. And so we have an example here that I just took at random from GitHub. This shows a Vagrant file in a GitHub listing, right? And that's what it looks like. Just right there with your source code, there's a Vagrant file that specifies how your box is going to be brought up. And there may be some provisioning. Now, when it comes to doing provisioning in your Vagrant file, I have found that less is better, because the more provisioning you do, the longer it takes. And who really wants to spin up a Vagrant box and have it go install a whole bunch of stuff and take 30 minutes to do? So I try to do most of the heavy lifting with Packer. And for the Vagrant file, I just kind of patch up the loose ends that can't be taken care of in the Vagrant file or the Packer file.
So is Packer really similar to Docker?
No, Packer is entirely different. Docker is a great subject. Vagrant supports Docker. You can create Docker containers with Vagrant, and you can create Docker containers with Packer, I believe. But Vagrant does support Docker containers, and I'm kind of working on that. Not really a good resource for that, but if you look in the Vagrant docs, you'll see that one of the Vagrant providers is Docker. Right. There's a Docker provider for Vagrant. So here's an example vagrant file, and this is the one for the demo that we'll be using today. It simply points to a VM. There's a file system path right there on 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth line down there, fourth and fifth. It just says there's the box file, and that's an actual virtual machine image. It's called a box file. It's Vagrant's own format. It's basically a gzipped tar file with a JSON file that has some metadata in it. Otherwise, it's just a VMDK along with this JSON file. And I specify a couple of shared folders there, and those are the SALT folders that I use. And another one is implicit.
Those are on your host.
Yes, those are on the host. Those, yes.
Okay. So just out of curiosity, this vagrant file right here, is this for a Windows box?
No, this is another Ubuntu box. It's
Okay.
a 1404 Ubuntu server.
Okay, that's what I was curious because the path looked kind of funny for a.
Oh, you mean the box URL?
Yeah, instead of like a C colon back there, you know.
Well, it's a URL, so it's got file colon dot or slash slash,
Right.
and then the path, which starts with a slash because it's anchored to the root.
Right.
And then I'm calling a salt provisioner. I just say use salt as a provisioner and run high state equal true. All right, so vagrant feature overview. We saw this in the vagrant file, the simple vagrant file, and this is an example that's not from my vagrant file. You can use vagrant over the net. You can grab a box that's out there. This is a Lucid 32 box that's on vagrantup.com. You can just do vagrant. So armed with a vagrant file, you can just do vagrant up, and it will go download your box because the URL is HTTP. In this case, it'll go grab your box and provision it for you. You could edit the vagrant file to point to some salt provisioning code that your vagrant file would run. It would grab this raw box, this kind of generic box, and then you could just provision it. So you don't actually have to have Packer build a box. You could just grab some already built box that's out there in a public repository.
So that would happen the first time you run vagrant up, right?
Yes, and vagrant caches this.
Okay.
So in the future, it would not go get this box again. It would just say, hey, do I already have this? Yep, I do. Let's go with it.
Okay. Where does it store that?
In your home directory on even Windows, Mac, and Linux, it creates a .vagrant.d directory. And every time you do vagrant up, if it doesn't have the box, it's going to go get it, and it's going to put it in your .vagrant.d directory. So that can get pretty large. So if you're using vagrant with a lot of boxes, know that directory is going to grow.
I kept doing this with like different boxes. And I'm like, one not this.
Why did my hard drive crash?
So for my box, it's in .vagrant.d/boxes.
Yeah.
So I can see those.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So forwarded ports. This is really cool. What you're looking at here is just kind of a standard port 8000 being forwarded to port 8080 on the host. So the guest, the vagrant box, is 8000, and the host gets 8080. So your web browser can hit 8080, and this example is from DealerTrack. Port 50,000 is what DB2 uses. So if you have a DB2 server running on your vagrant box, you can connect with a tool running on your host, if you like that Oracle database, SQL developer tool. Yeah, you run that on your host, and it connects to. It says, what's your DB2 connection info? You say localhost port 50,000, and it goes, oh, there it is, and that's pretty cool. You can even connect to that from a different box if you want to go connect to that, because unless you're filtering that port, then other hosts can connect to it as well. So that just reinforces this whole principle that the vagrant box is just an engine running on your host, an application engine. So stuff runs in there. using the dependencies that you're providing in this little encapsulated environment, and it exposes whatever you choose onto the host. Synced folders, we've mentioned that before. There's an example of the .pip folder. I'm sharing that into the home vagrant directory so that when I do pip install something on the vagrant box, that I don't have to go download every Python package again. It just goes, I see that you have that cached, and it pulls it right off of the local disk on the host. And of course, my salt pillar and salt folders are shared as well. And this is by the way, it also automatically shares the /vagrant directory, or syncs the /vagrant directory with the current directory where your vagrant file is. So, and there's some rules for which vagrant file it grabs. You can, I bet you I could make this bigger. So if you CD into the directory that has your vagrant file and you do vagrant up, that's going to be the directory that gets shared as /vagrant in your vagrant box, right? So if you connect to your vagrant box and do CD /vagrant, you're going to see your vagrant file along with all of your other source code in that directory, and that would be where you run your application code. And if you start your application, you do it from that directory, and if you're using PyCharm as your editor, you would be doing that on your host. And so you could change your source code, and if you're using Django, for instance, the Django debug server, when it runs, monitors your source files for changes. So you could change a file in PyCharm and click save, and you'll see your Django app in your VM restart. Because it'll notice that. Whoops.
To make any of these changes, you have to restart your vagrant box, or
what's that?
To change any of the config files, do you have to restart your vagrant box?
Yes, you do. It's only going to apply those changes when you do a vagrant up. So if you do change your synced folders or forwarded ports, that's not going to have any effect on vagrant. You're going to have to do vagrant halt, vagrant up to make those take effect. In fact, normally when you make a change like that, you actually want it to take effect. So I do a vagrant halt and then make the changes, vagrant up, and it's good. One other thing, when you run a provisioner, that only takes place when you do a vagrant up also. But if you want to rerun your provisioner, you can do that. You can just do vagrant reload. And it's possible a vagrant reload will catch forwarded ports and synced folders too, but I doubt it. That's something you can experiment with. Provisioners. Yeah, provisioning is that glue that adds stuff after the fact. I like to keep provisioning to a minimum because that can take a very long time. I've worked on vagrant dev environments before that take 30 minutes to provision because it was going out there and installing build essential, Postgres, a whole bunch of dependencies, Python, and everything to get this running, even before it got to the application setup. The basic thing that you want to do with provisioning is take it from a base box to installing your app, and it should take seconds at that point. You know, things that might be variable, like user accounts or volatile data, you know, stuff that you want to dump into your database to get your app ready to run in a dev environment. That sort of stuff is what you want to happen during provisioning. You just don't want it to take an awfully long time. Because otherwise, think about it, developers are going to be very resistant to restarting a vagrant box. They're going to go, no.
Something like if I created a vagrant box that, you know, we share out to all the other developers, and Will decided, oh, I want to have a special username, Will. You can just add that to the provisioning thing and just creates that, just on case.
Yeah, you can choose stuff like that. I mean, I use Vagrant as the user, but you know, in our demo, I have my salt provisioning installs a user Cyrus, right? Because Cyrus IMAPD, it uses the user Cyrus, and that's common. So I just say user Cyrus, install that, and that's fine. But you can have your provisioning scripts can be conditional. It can Salt can reach out to a database and say, hey, what do I need to set up for this? So you can do a bunch of conditional stuff. And one of the things about using Vagrant for development is that it can be the dev side of a pipeline, right? So Vagrant creates your stable and consistent environment on your dev box, but then you might have another system for QA and production, right? And those might be managed by your infrastructure team. And those might be created in different ways. They might be run on a VMware stack, where your dev box is run on a VirtualBox stack. So what Salt can offer you in those environments is consistency. So Salt can understand the difference between dev, QA, and production. You can run the same Salt code because Salt will be part of your application code, but when you run this stuff in a QA environment, it says, oh, I'm running in QA, so I'm going to set it up like this. Or, oh, I'm running in production, I'm going to set it up like this. And it understands the differences between your environments and your virtualization platforms. And guess what? It's also part of your application code, which circles back around to this whole idea of infrastructure in code. It's source controlled and versioned. You can tag it and say, it's this version now. And what happens if you do a production rollout and something goes wrong? Well, you can easily revert back to the prior version because all of your configuration is stored in the code. Say you had this production rollout where you upgraded from Python 2.7.8 to Python 3.4, right? And so that's a difference in your infrastructure, really. You have different software dependencies that are rolled out into your production environment, and you can't just roll out the source code again. You can't just roll it back to the prior version because now you've got Python 3.4 installed on your machine. And so, but using the infrastructure as code principle, well, your infrastructure requirements, your software dependencies are part of your application. So you just check out your old version and you redeploy, and that goes and installs all the requirements just like it would every single time. And it automatically installs the right version of every dependency that you need. So that's kind of a win. So you can arrange this throughout your dev, QA, production environments to get a consistent platform, and it's all versioned.
Can it also watch for Git commits and do a new push kind of thing?
Now Jenkins is a good tool for that watches for Git commits, and you can there are Vagrant plugins for Jenkins. So Jenkins can watch for a Git commit. Say if you've got like a typical Git flow would be a develop branch, and maybe you have a QA branch as well. And at some point you say, okay, we're ready for QA. So you merge develop into QA, and Jenkins is watching for that. So Jenkins then says, okay, let's go spin up a Vagrant environment for QA. And minutes later, your QA environment is ready to go. So Jenkins can automate all of that. Depends on how open-minded your infrastructure team is.
Let's sleep.
And I've fought those battles. We have issues. It's like, well, the infrastructure team doesn't want to give us that much freedom. They don't understand the whole infrastructure as code idea. So, your mileage may vary. So we have to just settle for less sometimes.
I think we could probably talk them into it because we're all the system operations group. We're just not, on the infrastructure team. We're the data platform team, we're the platform team. We sit right next to each other, so I think we could probably talk them into it. It's going to take a little bit of work.
It's a paradigm shift.
So are you on the developer team then, not the system operation team?
Yes. Yes. So I am currently suffering under the yoke of infrastructure team that has their own ideas of how all this should work, and they're a couple of years behind all of this.
Yeah.
Not really.
So they're more traditional.
Yes, yes.
How old is Vagrant?
Vagrant, October 2010 was the first release. Yeah, so it's pretty new. It's barely 4 years.
Yeah.
And you know, Docker is changing a lot for Vagrant. Somebody said to me recently, "Is Docker going to make Vagrant obsolete?" And I thought, well, no, because there's a Docker, there's a StatsD and Graphite are a couple of tools for monitoring, and they're really hard to set up. But there's a Vagrant box. You can on GitHub, you can just do git clone this repo, download a Vagrant box, Vagrant up, and it spins up. It downloads from the net a CentOS VM that contains a Docker container that it spins up and runs StatsD and Graphite. So it's really painless. So it combines Vagrant and Docker. So I don't know. I think Vagrant at this point is still relevant because even with Docker and containers, there's still VMs are never going to go away. You know, because I mean I don't know. Maybe AWS will figure out how to run just containers, and you don't have to pay. You pay. I mean, if you run a container, it costs you a lot less than maybe a VM. But I don't know, because Heroku is kind of containerized, and they're expensive.
I haven't researched it much, but I haven't been reading.
So,
When you say expensive, you're talking about like actual cost to use it or like resource cost?
well, cost to use it, yeah. If you want, like for instance, you can compare it to the cost of running a virtual machine on AWS. Heroku charges you a lot. You'll pay a lot more to get a basic application running in the non-free mode, right? I mean, free mode is a different story, but if you want Postgres with this much resource, you're going to pay $10 a month, and you want this other thing, you're going to pay $10 a month. To get a viable VM or a viable application platform on Heroku is going to cost you more than a viable application platform on AWS, because Heroku kind of nickels and dimes you to death. And it's targeted at two different audiences. If you're able to configure your AWS VM by yourself, if you're familiar with infrastructure and can do that, great, you're going to save money. But with Heroku, if you just want to say, click and add Postgres, click and add this, click and add that, they're going to charge you for the convenience factor.
Yeah. If you want more CPU on it, you just drag the slider.
Yeah. Yeah, but on AWS, you got to figure that out yourself.
You have to probably spin up a different box.
Yeah, do load balancing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's way more expensive.
So here's an example of provisioning in the Vagrant file. You can do shell provisioning. I'm fond of this, just pointing to a shell script and doing that. I play with Salt from time to time, but I think Salt really shines when it's distributed. Speaking of Salt, there's a Salt Stack example. That's pretty much all you have to do is say, is point to the Salt files and say run high state, and it just goes, and Salt does its thing. So, and your Salt configuration, whatever Salt stack, lives with your application code. So, you know, you can change that. You can, make commits.
This is running in masterless mode.
Yeah, it depends on your Salt configuration. This does not necessarily need to be running in masterless mode. It depends on the configuration in your Salt config file.
Okay.
Right?
So basically what you would have to do then is, if you were going to run this and it was going to a master, you would have to have had your VM accept the Salt key and all that kind of stuff prior to packaging it all up.
That's right. You could arrange for that somehow,
Yeah.
right? You could do it when you build your box with Packer, or you might be able to take care of that using a shell provisioning step ahead of the Salt provisioning.
Okay. Okay. Cool. I was looking at this, actually these examples last night. I was like, how you would almost have to open up your machine, get it synced up, and then every time after that, it provisions it for you, which is
Right.
pretty cool. But- Okay.
Yeah, go get some music, I guess, go. Yes, I should do that. Fancy. I was just wondering where I was turning on lights
Oh,
at.
cool. Oh, I still listen. Dude, like rice, you don't get any because first call outs. There you go. Perfect.
I was trying to turn on those lights for that. That's not happening.
Turn on the light.
Yeah. But I don't know how we it's all working. I can even turn on a freaking light.
No, I don't get it. I don't get it. It doesn't work. There you go. I figured it out. I'll get stop working. There's other switches. Oh my god. What? What just happened? Magical. I turned them on and we're in switches over there. Usability, weird. Those should probably be in the same spot. Whoa.
Right? Did Microsoft design this setup?
So as you can see, right, Scott, we have Macs and Windows boxes, and nobody cares, right? It's like,
That's great.
do we have?
And you
to?
shouldn't have to care,
No,
right?
no, we shouldn't. We'll all do just fine. Yeah, when I started playing with Vagrant, I don't know, almost probably a few weeks ago. I knew of it all because you did a presentation at Dealer Track, but I hadn't had a need for it until recently.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was trying to do was spin up a Logstash, elk stack developer VM or many of them, and that's where some of Chris's questions are coming from because. I just downloaded one off the net. Just like you said, I pulled it right out of GitHub, cloned it, figured out.
Right.
That's it.
That's beautiful.
I had a Logstash environment set up, running, ready to go.
That is so cool.
And I was like, sweet. So then I started pulling files into it, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is the way we should do our development environment.
Mm-hmm.
So then I turned to Chris and said, I don't understand this crap. More than that. So, at least provisioning VMs, I didn't really had to do that much. So I went to him and said, okay, we need something that's sort of production-like. So if nothing else, I'd like to have, our Q VM, whatever that is, RabbitMQ, Redis, whatever. I think we've got one of each, or we've got a bit of both in the same VM. Quite sure. We've got our Logstash only VM, then we've got an Elasticsearch VM. Just one. Is that right?
So I ran everything on one and then created additional Elasticsearch ones.
Okay.
So when you do bigger enough, it actually just spins up 4 boxes. My problem is when I'm here, I'm on one network. When I go home, I'm on a different network. When I'm on the train, I'm on a different network. So synchronizing the Elasticsearch by a host name was not working well. So I manually set this up in VirtualBox where I added a second NIC card.
Mm-hmm.
And those were all running 192.168.100 network on the second NIC, and those would run all the time, and that's how Elasticsearch communicated and did all its syncing. But then each one of the NIC ones were running off DHCP off whatever environment I was on, so I could actually get out and run, yum update, and, yum install, stuff like that. So I would have I could go out to NIC 1, but they all communicated with each other through NIC 2.
Mm-hmm.
So you want.
I like to run my virtualization as NAT, because then because my IP addresses, I control every VM that runs in my environment. I control its IP address, its network range,
Right.
So it's just NAT. It gets a local IP address it's private, and so wherever I am, doesn't matter because all of my VMs get allocated from the same private network range.
Yeah, the problem is if you're on the train, it doesn't work. For some reason, it blocks.
Well, it works. It works even if I'm not hooked up to a wireless network, right? Because my VMware has its own DHCP server. So if a guest spins up, it gets an IP address. Right now, I'm using 192.168.85 Class C.
But the problem is you can't hard code an IP address for cluster synchronization that way.
Right.
So I would never, I couldn't keep my Elasticsearch cluster talking to each other by just setting up just a NAT address. And that's the way it is now. Is they're all NATed, like or Ethernet 0 is all NATed, and then Ethernet 1 is all hard coded.
Okay.
Just so the cluster can talk to each other all the time. Otherwise, when I go somewhere else, the host file isn't valid anymore.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
How do you do anything on that train network? It's so slow.
On your phone. On your train. Maybe use this on your phone.
I'll just bring up your laptop.
No, there's Wi-Fi. Oh, really?
The train's pretty busy.
We can just go for a ride on the train one day and work on the train all day.
Right there.
It's like $200.
You know what? Nobody will disturb us, no meetings.
That's what I'm saying. We'd actually get stuff done. We struggle because we're all in the business of customer service. That's the way it should be, and that's the path is. He pushes it hard, so people, come to us as they should. When they have a problem, they don't just sit there and spin their wheels. They come to us, and we just have to accept it. And so it doesn't matter what we're working on. In our sprint, we only have aside from Abby, he doesn't count. He's a freak. He gets so many things done, but we'll have 3 points, 4 points in our sprint total, and the rest of the time is supporting whoever comes to your desk and giving them your full attention. And
we used to call those drive-bys.
So yeah, I mean that's where the whole getting on a train and not being right comes from.
At Zango, we used to position the product manager, the project manager, at the end of the aisle, and if anyone tried to come in and talk to an engineer, he'd what can I do for you?
That's awesome.
Yeah, hiring.
Seriously, we're going to kick Brett's team out of that pod. We're all going to move into it. And then where Devin sits, we're going to put a project manager. We'll just put Matthew there. Done.
I'm about to say, I don't think I want Matthew sitting there.
This is broadcasting.
No, I'm just saying, because it's kind of a task, as he should be.
Yeah. Anybody had the room afterwards, just in case you wanted to use extra time for demo or whatever.
Yeah, I do have a short demo. You guys are pretty familiar with everything I would show you. Vagrant up, Vagrant.
It's only been me and Chris. So,
Okay.
and we would love to see him well. So we just been toying around with it when we have a minute. It hasn't even been at work. It's been playing around. He's had some time. So
I would like to see bigger files.
All right.
Like big files. That's what
Well, my demo is really short. It doesn't need to be complicated. I've got one at DealerTrack that's pretty gnarly because it will consume one of two different Vagrant boxes. One of them was created by our New York team and is not my preferred box, and it needs one set of provisioning steps to be taken to get it to where I need it. The other one is a much smaller, leaner Packer-built box that I built. And so it can take either one, and it reads environment variables from the environment, right? I set an environment variable that says, use this Packer box for this project. So when I do vagrant up, it says, which one am I using? Set the vagrant vm.box equal this, and a couple other things. And using that information, it just decides what provisioning script needs to be run, which folders need to be mounted.
So do you have like one vagrant file on your box that you set the environment variables like that, or do you have like multiple directories? Because I've got like 3 of them now.
Well, I have one vagrant file per dev project.
Okay. Okay. Vagrant file or vagrant folder within your vagrant directory?
No, it's a vagrant file. So in a GitHub repo, top level, I just have a vagrant file, and that's it. So do git clone, vagrant up, there's your dev environment.
Okay. And do you keep the box out there, or do you just pull it from a different, from like an existing box somewhere that someone else has built?
Well, right now the box is local. Every developer
Right.
has to go Packer build, right? Because the Packer box description is just a JSON file that's packaged up in the GitHub repo in the source. So the entire development environment is specified in detail in the Packer configuration. So we just don't have a server that we can take a Packer box and put it on yet. We've done some experiments. Vagrant supports SMB shares, so you could do that, but that brings in authentication and all that stuff. And honestly, it's just been a matter of it works the way it is now, and there's not enough devs on any single project to justify it. We need a shared resource location for this. So when a dev does git clone on a project, it's Packer build box, caches it locally, right? And then when you do vagrant up, it just goes and gets that box locally. And the box changes rarely, so if it does what it is going to take 15 minutes to build another Packer box and keep it locally. But you can keep the Packer box anywhere. You know, HTTP locally using file whack whack, SMB : whack whack. You can keep it anywhere. It works. I've tested the SMB. It works great. So, you know, from a Mac using Windows file shares, you can do that with Vagrant. Just do Vagrant up. It'll go get your Packer box. Your Packer built Vagrant box is what I should say.
So do you have all your vagrant box always running, or?
No. I work on 3 projects on and off. So often I'll do vagrant up, and it'll say I couldn't forward this port because it's already in use, and I'm like, oh right, because this other box is running. Switch screens, vagrant halt, and then wait a second, vagrant up. You know, so no, I don't keep them always running. And one of the great things about vagrant is that often, I don't know about the rest of the development world, but I sometimes screw up my dev environment. It just is horribly wrong. It doesn't work. And you know, in the bad old days, you had to go figure out what was wrong, right? Like DB2 drivers. I remember right after I first started, one of the new devs that started same day as me could not get his DB2 driver working for anything. And Will got sucked into that. It like sucked in the whole department almost.
Yeah.
And well, it was running on the host. So what could you do but figure out why the DB2 driver doesn't work? I've had that problem with vagrant boxes. What do? Vagrant destroy, vagrant up. 5 minutes later, I'm back in business. And it's beautiful because you screw up your box, destroy it, bring it up again. And it takes away fear for a developer because, you know, you're always afraid, oh, if I do this, I don't know what's going to happen. Am I going to screw something up? But you just work with no fear because you know that you're 5 minutes away from a clean, fresh environment all the time. You just vagrant destroy, vagrant up, and you're back in business.
So when you start a box, do you specify the number?
Because I wanted more food on my plate.
You can specify that. It's provider dependent. If you read the vagrant docs, it'll tell you in excruciating detail how to specify additional CPUs and memory for your box using options. And I believe in the Packer configuration, the build config, I specify that as well. I may be wrong on that with Vagrant. I think it's all in Packer because that's part of your box. Yeah, I was confusing the two. So with Packer, when you build your box, you can specify how many CPUs and how much memory.
If you don't, you just use whatever you can.
No, the characteristics of your virtual machine are specified when you create it. So if you go to say VMware Workstation and you do File, New Virtual Machine, it's going to take you through a wizard that says how many CPUs, how much memory, how big is your disk, that sort of thing. And the same, yes, you can do the same thing with Packer. But so by the time Vagrant gets your virtual machine, all that's already been done.
So does it mean that it always holds onto the resources even if you're not using it?
No.
That's right.
Oh, if you're not.
Well,
if it's up.
Yes, if it's up, yes.
So you can just hold it. And then.
Okay, but it's always using that. So.
Yes.
But the best part is if you have like 6 of them running, you don't have like 100 freaking VBox windows open on the bottom. I hate that one.
That's why he wants to use Vagrant.
No, seriously.
No, when you say this thing,
I can't actually use my machine anymore. All my memory and all my CPUs are gone, but I don't have that little thing on the bottom.
Okay, so let me just continue on here.
Yeah.
So different providers. Vagrant works with VirtualBox, VMware Fusion, Workstation, and my laptop uses VMware Workstation, and I'm using the paid provider. Hyper-V, Docker, which is interesting. I'm trying to wrap my head around Docker because it's not really a virtualization platform in terms of machine virtualization, containerization, but works with AWS as well. So you can create AWS VMs, and you just need your secret key ID, and yeah, you need to tell it what AMI you're going to use, and then it's off to the races. Everything else is the same. Yeah.
So if I set up on AWS and I just said, put in the parameters for it, Vagrant up, and I just do Vagrant SSH from there, it'll just take me right out.
That's right. That's right.
That's pretty cool.
So there's an AWS plugin. It was not written by Mitchell Hashimoto. It was written by someone else, but it works and it's really easy to install. You just install the plugin, and you can easily spin up an AWS VM. And yes, Vagrant supports Windows.
What? Yeah.
What the hell?
I did a demo with Packer building a Windows box just because I was presenting to a crowd I thought would be skeptical, right? Yeah, great, you can build a Linux box, but that's not, who cares about that? You can automate anything Linux, right? We care about Windows. So I used Packer to create a Windows box, and I ran it on my Mac, and it went through the complete build process. You could see all the stuff going in a window because I told it to turn headless mode off, and so it displayed the window. You could see everything running, and then at the end I did Vagrant up, Vagrant SSH, and you got a Windows command line right there. It was pretty cool.
Awesome.
And then I used an RDP client to connect to it. So the typical command line workflow with Vagrant is Vagrant up, Vagrant SSH, Vagrant halt, Vagrant destroy, Vagrant box list, and Vagrant box remove. And I threw the name of the box on there just for kicks. So those are the commands that typically that I use on a regular basis. So Vagrant destroy destroys your current Vagrant box in your environment. So If you did a vagrant up and you say, I don't want that anymore, vagrant destroy, it'll take it away. But if you did a vagrant up and it went and downloaded a box, it puts it in your list of boxes that you have. And if you say, I'm no longer going to use that and I would like the 850 megabytes freed on my system, you can do vagrant box remove. If you want to see which boxes are on your system, you can say vagrant box list.
When you vagrant halt, does it save the machine state?
No, it does not. It just shuts it down. It's just like, it's a graceful shutdown. It sends a command that, like on Linux, it would be halt or shutdown dash R
Save your
or
files first.
H.
Yeah, we keep our files out there and stuff.
Yeah, just whatever you got open.
So it'll just gracefully shut down your machine. Now, I thought I'd mention that PyCharm integrates all of these commands into the user interface.
Yeah, you were showing me that.
So PyCharm knows all about vagrant. And you can actually,
Validate probably does too.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
so you can do things like remote debugging. You know, you can set breakpoints in your Python code with PyCharm, and you can say vagrant up, whatever. It's pretty cool.
Now give us a version of PyCharm that works with Django.
Well, we have to pay for the community edition, or we've got to hack it up.
So Scott, how did you say the box gets the latest code? Do you have to go into vagrant and say get code? How does it get the latest code at the box as it is? Say you have a new jar file, right? I mean, I understand with Python, right? It's watching a shared folder and it restarts the whole thing. I mean, you have to push like a jar file, or how does that work?
Like if you want that as part of your software dependencies,
Sure. I mean, anytime I have new code, how does vagrant know that there's a new jar file out there or there's new?
it doesn't. It doesn't know anything about your application. If you have provisioning going on when you do vagrant up and it provisions things, then you can do some application install and configuration at that point. With Django, it's easy because you just start your vagrant box and Python manage.py and you're good. Or other Python type applications. I often put it in my .bash RC, my vagrant vagrant users.bash RC to set the virtual environment and get me just ready to go. But if you were doing Java development or something and you had jar files, maybe you would want to compile them on your host first. Maybe you would want to compile them inside the VM as part of a provisioning step.
And then cp jar file into the box.
You don't have to because of synced folders,
Oh,
right? You just say, I want this folder to point to this folder on the host. So this is the last slide. So there's a list of references there that you can look at, and I have a demo that I can show you. Oh, it's right there. So vagrant status, that actually was not in my list of frequently used commands, but it is a frequently used command. So not running, it tells you not running, and in parentheses on the right is the provider, VMware Workstation. So I'm going to do, because I just started that up when I was in Pat's desk. Doing some last minute changes. I thought maybe I could show, on the way here I thought of a demo that might be useful, but it was a last minute thing and I didn't have network. So I didn't quite get it set up, but maybe we have time. I have a meeting in 25 minutes, so we may not.
You gotta go, just go.
So that's the destroy process. Are you sure you want to destroy the default VM? And default is a name. So if you're running a multi-machine environment, I think that would be different. But yes, so it deleted the VM, and file. It's not too long, 21 lines. It's the one that was in the slide, so not much to it really. It just sets the bare minimum, couple of sync folders. Vagrant box list. So that Cyrus IMAP-D backup. That's the box I was talking about. So that's one of the boxes in my list. And you see I have a Win 7 x64 Ultimate box. I could probably spin that up too. It's in a different directory, but that is in my list of boxes. So that's a global list. That's not in this environment. So we can just do vagrant up and you can see this. So it's going to go into my global list of boxes, clone this into the current environment. There's a .vagrant directory in the current working directory. It's going to clone that into there. And it won't take that much time because I have SSD, so it'll be done in a sec. And then it's just going to spin it up, map the ports, sync the folders, run the salt provisioner, and it'll be done. So there's the port forwarding you see right there. So it always forwards port 22 on a Linux box to 2222 on the host.
So I could just SSH into 1.7.0.1 or.
Yes, but you don't even need to go to that much trouble. You can just do vagrant SSH, and there's another thing you can do as well. You can do vagrant SSH-config, and it'll show you what your SSH configuration is, because it has a default key pair. It's not secure. If you need security, then you should generate your own. But it maintains an SSH configuration so that when you do vagrant SSH, it just knows what to do. Okay. So I never actually just SSH to localhost 2220.
Make some SSH in between them, or use SCP or something.
Yeah, you can certainly do that, yes. But guess what? If you already have a vagrant VM running, it's going to already own 2222. So vagrant is smart enough to say, let's use 2223 for this one. It won't have a collision with port 2222 on your host, because it will notice that it's already bound and it will use a different port.
Oh, okay.
So you got to keep that in mind in the multiple VM scenario. You can't reserve port numbers for SSH. And you probably can configure each vagrant file to use a specific port.
Right.
And since the vagrant file is nothing but Ruby, you can probably actually put some logic in there.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so
like we'll have a file. Rob asked my vagrant address.
absolutely.
Okay.
So there's the
That's
SSH.
Yeah, that was a good.
There's the SSH config command right there. And this is a private IP address, so it's NAT. So you'd have to worry about that if you were SSHing in from off box.
Yeah.
And so user vagrant port 22 on the guest, and there's the vagrant.d insecure private key that's in my global .vagrant.d directory.
It's the same one for all of them.
Yeah, that's what it does by default, but I think you can just specify which key to use.
Okay.
Like if you set this up on AWS, you might want to use a different one. So we can do vagrant SSH. That will connect us to the box. So there you go. Let me do this. And there are the files in the directory. I'm going to cd into the guest / vagrant directory, and there are the same files. We are now in the guest. Username is in the prompt. It's vagrant right there. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know what this is about. This is the problem I was having. I had this last-minute demo idea when I was driving over here, but I don't think it's going to work because I don't have the dependencies installed on the box. But I thought it would be cool to show this application running and just connect on the local web browser. But, okay, so further questions?
Packer config file.
I can show you that.
Awesome.
Packer's great. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. That's why I'm kind of curious about that. Because that may have been way easier to set these boxes, that box up in.
Thing. Yeah, this is kind of gnarly. Always extra complicated.
Right.
Thing to do. Oops.
Crap, restart.
That'll take a second to open this 1 gig file. Okay. Fun. Ubuntu. That's the one. Now. Okay, that's a little more clear. So, okay, so variables, just some parameters that you can set at the beginning. Builders, we're going to do a VMware ISO builder, and that says start from the Ubuntu ISO image, right? The distribution, go to Ubuntu's website, download the ISO image for it, and then this boot command business is a script, like keystroke level script. Do this, type this in, and then this precede here. CentOS has a file called Jumpstart, I think. It's a Jumpstart file. It's basically a list of requirements for automated OS install. In Ubuntu, it's called precede. They both just script the installation. So you tell it what to do, escape, enter, wait, and then enter that command, install VM Linux, no APIC. And then there's your precede file and just a few installation instructions. And you can see these keystrokes that are speckled in there. You have to actually enter these are keystrokes that get entered on your behalf. Let's wait 5 seconds for boot.
So just out of curiosity, this VMware ISO, is that like a reserved name? Is knows where to go out and find that?
Yes, that is a reserved name. That says I'm going to build for VMware, and I'm going to start from an ISO. It's got 2 different types. You can start from an already built box. So you can have a vagrant box already built, and then you can start from that vagrant box and add to it. Or you can start from an ISO and create a fresh box.
Okay, but you have to have the ISO downloaded.
You do, yes, and that's... Where did I keep the... Well, let's just find the ISO in the file. There we go. Download uTopic server AMD ISO, right there.
Okay.
And you have to supply the checksum so it knows that's a valid ISO file. Just kind of a sanity check. Output directory, you can see there's kind of a templating replaceable parameter. So those variables were specified up here. See that? And then directory, username and password. And then there's just some instructions for the builder on the timeout, because if it starts to build this, it pretty much depends on SSH, and it'll sit there and wait for the SSH server to become available. And if it waits too long, then it'll say, I give up. It's not happening.
So you give it 30 minutes.
I give it 30 minutes to install the box and start the SSH server.
Okay.
And you want a shutdown command. So on Windows, it's different, right? If you're building a Windows box, you enter a Windows shutdown command, something that can run from the command prompt. So all of this stuff is just about building the box. And this is the memory that we were talking about. I think I got your name. What's your name?
Abhishek.
Amashik?
Abhishek, you could call me Abhishek.
I'm in. Okay. There's the memory size on the box. So this is how we specify how the box is built in Packer. And there's a couple other options here. We're using config version 8. I think I'm on VMware 10 right now. So I think that's specifying the hardware version. So these are VMware specific parameters. Packer is aware of VMware.
But if you run this with Docker, right, you don't need all this. You can just take it from here and run it in a Docker container. Just shut the VMware.
I don't know specifically if Packer can build a Docker container. I think it can. There are the documentation is pretty good for Packer and Vagrant. So provisioners, once you get the box built, what are you going to do? I just have a shell script. Post build, just do some stuff right after the build. I don't know, I forget what's in there. I can show you the scripts and install some apps and install this IMAP sync.
Yeah, so those are local to your box.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they are. Post processors. Let's take this box and turn it into a Vagrant box. That's what a post processor is. Okay, we built your VMware box. Let's turn it into a Vagrant box now. So that just takes it and boxes it up, creates the JSON metadata file, puts it in a gzip tar file, and renames it .box. So it becomes a Vagrant box. Yeah, how tight do you want that squeezed? So, yeah. Let's see, post. What did I do? Just some shells. Yeah, just some cleanup, I think. Group add admin, user mod. Yeah, I just tweaked some things about the Vagrant user. Looks like. Yeah, you can see I'm just doing some miscellaneous stuff. Set up a key file. And app, okay, here's just a bunch of stuff that I want to be installed. So just do that. You could do that with Salt, or you could do it with a shell script.
Or you could do it within Vagrant in your.
You could create an inline script
Right.
that in your Vagrant file. Yes, you could do that
What
too.
do they call the provisioner?
Yes, and this is provisioning, but this is in Packer. So you could do it in Vagrant too, but the idea is that Packer's gonna do this at build time.
And it's going to build once.
Right. You don't have to do this every time you go Vagrant up fresh. Because if you do a Vagrant destroy Vagrant up, and this is in your Vagrant provisioning, you do this every single time. And it gets old really fast.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a meeting in 10 minutes too, but it's nearby. Well, thanks for having me, guys.